Good afternoon, all our viewers. My name is Fred Kasidie. I'm the Dean Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Victoria University. I am very, very happy today to interact with all of you viewers on this very unique topic, survival skills under difficult circumstances. It is not any news that we are, as a country and as a globe, we are going through pretty very difficult time as a result of the global pandemic. But these conditions differ in gravity, that is how big they are, and even in impact. This condition is new for many of us, but we can say for as long as the world has existed, this condition is not new. Generations after generations have been encountering similar conditions. However, like I said initially, it's always the gravity of the challenge, and normally it's how we deal with that gravity that normally helps us to see the better day. So this particular lecture shall help us see how best we can survive under such similar conditions. If we looked at the objectives for today's session, we can break them down into four. We would want to identify and understand, as well as classify, the different difficult circumstances. We would want to improve our personal and group awareness of the environment in which we live. We also want to know, identify the ways in which we can build capacity to manage these difficult circumstances. At the end of the lecture, we shall be able to share some lessons from what has happened in the recent past within our country with regards to managing these circumstances. Like I initially said, circumstances differ in terms of size and impact. It can be a personal challenge, it can be a group challenge, it can be a nationwide challenge, it can also be a global challenge. What we are dealing with today is the global pandemic, for instance. But we have dealt with national challenges before. For those that lived during the time of the Civil War in this country, you very well know how hard it was to survive during such time. Also for the individuals that lived way much earlier than all of us, you might have experienced the flus that affected the world and probably knew how hard your parents managed to survive at the time. So basically, in this particular discussion, we would want to share perspectives from social science. Before a situation gets medical, how can you try to manage it? Before you get stressed, how can you try to manage that situation? I think throughout this class, we shall be able to establish how best this can be done. The content of this particular presentation looks at the different examples of difficult circumstances. We are going to look at the universal strategies to consider in such time. And then also, I will share with you those particular necessary skills that you need to overcome such tragedies at whichever level, like I said, personal, team, group, community, national, or even international tragedies, such as the global pandemic. So let us immediately get started on the examples of the different circumstances that we might be faced with. I want to imagine that everybody is taking a quick scan through on what is available on this PowerPoint, and then also reflecting on their personal lives and saying what it is that they have gone through in the recent past. Let's take the first example, natural hazards. It's not a very common phenomena here in this country, but it is very common in Asia. It's very common in the USA. We've heard of hurricane this, hurricane that. We've heard of tsunamis. While in our country we try to politicize such scenarios, these particular natural hazards are very dangerous and they can be very detrimental to society. We've talked about mudslides, for instance, in our country. In Duda, mudslides are not anything new. We also have seen the effect of water in rainwater in terms of floods in Kasese. That is also not new. And most recently, nationwide, we have seen the rising water table, which has affected settlers close to the lake. These are categorized as natural hazards. Oftentimes, we don't plan for them, but they are bound to hit us. These circumstances come whether you have planned for them or you have not planned for them. I am sure no company at the planning session last year ever thought would be hit by a global flu. But here we are, many of us all at home and trying to see how we sustain our lives while at home. So natural hazards, epidemics, we have lived with one for a very long time. HIV, it's not a new story, but we have managed and established how best to survive amidst its presence. And here we are now, faced with a new challenge, COVID-19, wondering how best we can survive even when it continues to stay within our societies. So it's been a difficult challenge, but we know and we are certain that this condition can as well be managed. Through the examples we shall look at later in the session, we shall share minds on how best we can survive amidst all these challenges. One thing about epidemics or pandemics, normally these have a potential to wipe out a population. We have seen a number of cases across the world. The impact in the US, the impact in our neighborhood has been drastic. Millions are dying. Thousands are hospitalized. And this speaks with regards to the socio-economic structures that have been built over generations. They are at a test. We've heard of countries with the best health systems being put to their knees. But what are those simple things that we can do that do not necessitate us to get into the complicated applications when such epidemics or pandemics hit us? That should be part of our discussion today. Also recently, this country was affected by locusts. Locusts in some parts of the world are said to be edible. But let us look at the destructive part. Locusts can be very, very destructive. They can eat up vegetation. Therefore, because we never planned that we shall be in any way affected by locusts, and so we never do this kind of planning every time we plan our agriculture, it's important to know how best can we handle a situation such as this when it finally hits us and then we are lost for a course of action. What are those simple things that we can do to survive and then see whether we have better business the days to come? Just like all the other initial circumstances that we can be faced with, locusts have the potential to destroy agriculture as a sector, making people unable to have food for generations for years, and therefore food security becomes a problem. Recession. We have heard about countries get into recession. For one reason or the other, countries survive on their economics. Earning and spending is the order of the day. However, in cases where there is recession, companies re-strategize. And the first victims are the staff. Many people are laid off because companies cannot survive. This has a great impact. It causes financial stress. In some cases, it even causes loss of lives because of the uncertainty that is created. Lastly, for the examples that we would want to interface with today are some of the circumstances that we normally get ourselves into. Death is a given. Everybody shall have to pass on at some time. So how prepared are you? And how prepared are you preparing those that will live after you? Divorce, for the many people that have gone through a divorce, I'm sure this is not something that anyone would want to go through. It's walking from commitment to breaking away. It's very stressful. It could cause loss of lives. It causes a loss of a safety net. So its effects are as drastic as disappearing of a loved one. Someone you love getting lost and you do not know where this person is. It causes trauma. The uncertainty that all these circumstances cause can be very detrimental to life. So this lecture speaks volumes with regards to what it is that we can do to ensure that we go through such difficult circumstances in society, in the simple communities where we stay, without straining our budgets, without straining our livelihoods, but basically living slightly below our expected livelihood. So that marks the end of our first session. Let's go for a break. When we return, we shall be looking at the specific steps that we need to take to ensure that we survive during such difficult circumstances. Thank you for your viewership. I want to welcome you from the break. If you do recall, we did try to classify circumstances that we go through in our day-to-day lives. Those that are predictable and those that are not predictable. Just to recap, we did see occurrences such as natural hazards, occurrences, situations of epidemics, locusts, recession, death, divorce, or even losing a loved one. We agreed in the earlier session that these circumstances can be very, very detrimental to a person's life. They can also be very, very destructive of society's way of life. They have everything to do with livelihood. And so, we would need to know if you are hit by any difficult circumstance, no matter the level, globally, nationwide, or even at your company. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you lost a loved one. Maybe, probably your company is closing. These are all oftentimes unpredictable. It's very unlikely that you will have wind of any of these circumstances coming your way. But here is what you need to do. Everybody shall tell you, stay composed. Yes, stay composed is the first rule. Whenever you're faced with shock, stay composed, stay focused. But at a personal level, do an assessment. Understand what it is exactly that has hit you. In this particular case, each of our households, each of our companies, each of our community members should be able to appreciate what it is that COVID-19, for instance, brings to the world. The impact it has caused many, the loss of jobs that many have had to go through 3-4 months without pay, and even the future is uncertain. The closure of business. So many SMEs are struggling, and that's not only within Uganda, but globally. The future of your education. A candidate ready to sit your exams, but you're not so sure whether these exams shall be fielded at the same sitting this year. You're losing out on class time and you're worried. All these have the potential to create panic within an individual. It is therefore very important to do a personal level assessment for the individual, but then also a group level assessment at our family levels. We need to see how are our families ready for this, what it is that this challenge brings to us. I will move deeper into these aspects in the next segment, but now I need to give you an outlay of what it is that you need to do firsthand, what it is that you need to appreciate before you get into a panic mode. You need to establish how ready your family is prepared for this. I am certain and sure that this is a situation you never planned for, but then here you are. You have a family behind you. They are looking up to you. How are you going to handle this? This is a discussion not only for you as the family head, for instance, or as the company CEO. No, it is a discussion you need to involve the entire family with. As a CEO, you need to get your teams together, right from the janitor to the top managers. You need to see how best everybody shall be able to go through this particular challenge or circumstance. So we need then, after we do the assessment, we need to establish our priorities and realign our goals. What it is that we need to do immediately, what it is that we need to do in the midterm, and what it is that we need to do in the long term. The eventuality is that situation shall return to normal. But it is important for you to establish, under these turbulent times, what it is that you can do to survive. That is the key word, to survive. Asked to stay away from business, stay home for 14 days, 21 days, another 14, and another 21, however long it might take. There are basics that need to go on. You must feed as a family. That's just minimum. It's essential. It's basic. But you need to plan for that too. You need to set your priorities right. What do you want to do in this difficult time that shall not throw you off balance? That should be the discussion. Thirdly, you must establish your key stakeholders, your partners. At a company level, a company needs to establish those horizontal and vertical partners with whom they have to do business together, amidst these very trying times. For instance, if I am an education institution, I have contracted suppliers for a school term. We expected to have students paying fees so that we can pay for the supplies that we obtained before the school term began. And there, we were hit by a global pandemic. Schools were closed abruptly. We have stock in the stores, which stock might also be threatened with going bad. This can be a very difficult time. Millions of money obtained, you have credit, but then you do not know how to proceed. You need to get your stakeholders, your suppliers, back into a discussion. Of course, food is a necessary good, but you might not need it in school for that time. It's not worthwhile having it in your stores. It's therefore important that you get the stakeholders back into a discussion, establish how best this stock can probably be taken away, have an understanding. That stock can then be used in a different way, probably sold out, so that individuals out there that are getting hungry can be able to survive on this stock that is still good for use before it actually perishes. These are the discussions we are looking at. As an individual, you are looking at your end of month salary. Unfortunately, you cannot have it. All you have before you is a letter terminating you and telling you that they will be able to contact you at the time situation has normalized. You need to establish who it is that you need to work with to go through this difficult time. That might be your immediate family. It might be your wife. That discussion should go on. And this teaches us that in everything that we do in life, everybody needs close associates. Everybody needs partners. Everybody needs people to work with. You cannot be an island. So it is very important that you identify the partners with whom you will walk this journey. Not only as a recipient, but also show what it is that you give back. If you are settling home, for instance, at your parents' home, and for one reason or the other it's going to be a burden to the family, especially with regards to feeding, it's important that you start looking at how best you can help the situation with regards to helping out on providing for the family that you might be a burden to. It's a give and take, and it's a give and take for everybody at whichever level. Governments are grappling. Loans are being taken out. But governments also have to think how to give and how best they can get. By giving, you might see, for instance, Government of Uganda recently rolled out a campaign to ensure that those hard-pressed communities obtain at least some food. That campaign is still ongoing. These are the stakeholders we talk about. Government without people cannot exist. So it's only important that at this difficult time, government starts to see how best to support its people that are hard hit in these kinds of circumstances. Then a very critical step you must take so that you do not fumble is develop an immediate recovery plan. You might never know how long this difficult circumstance will take, but it is important to have a tick off of actions that you must take before situations get worse. If you lost a job, important you start looking for one. or prepare yourself to get one, or create one for yourself. As hard as it can get. Schools closed. You have to pay salaries for teachers. Parents did not pay their fees to the last balance. You're in the middle of trouble. How do you handle this? Immediately, how do you handle this? Midterm, how do you handle this? In the long term, have a discussion. Don't let this stress kill you. As a manager, as an individual in a company, do not let it kill you. Do not let it stress you to the point of escaping from your community. Have a discussion and establish a roadmap. Of course, in this matter, you must have a history of trust, because you must be able to put action to every word that you say. What social science teaches us is that we cannot live without our societies. We cannot live without people. And all these first steps are very predominant in social work, in social science practice. In the field of arts, people are everything. People are solutions to everything. Therefore, we advise that even in difficult circumstances, it's people first. It's people first, then the rest shall follow. I want to thank you all for having tuned in for our second segment of this class. We can now head out for a break. After the break, we shall look at the specific actions and what is involved in those different actions with regards to the first steps that we need to take, such that we have a complete idea of how to go through such difficult circumstances. Thank you for viewing. Welcome back for this last segment of our training today. Just to recap, it was important for us to, in the first segment, to establish what different circumstances we normally fall into that are difficult for us as individuals, as teams where we work, or as countries where we live. We did run through a couple of them. We noticed that there can be natural hazards, there can be epidemics, like the one we are currently faced with. There can be circumstances where we lose loved ones, maybe through death or by them getting lost, and many such circumstances. We have also learnt in the second segment that there are quick first steps that we must take when hit by any such difficult circumstances. To quickly recap, we have learned that it is important to take stock of what it is that has happened, do an assessment, establish where we are in this whole picture. It's also important for us to establish our key stakeholders. Who is it that we are with in this whole story? It is also important for us to establish what it is that we need to do immediately, mid-term, and also in the long term with regards to recovery. Because we know these situations stay, but we must survive. The language is basically survival. The language is survival, and survival is what it is. So we would now want to dive into the deeper part in this last segment to establish the key skills that we must have in order for us to go through such a difficult time. The difficult subject is money. Key questions around money or cash management should be income stability. Are you able to guarantee that? Income security. Are you able to guarantee that throughout the period of this particular difficult circumstance? How stable is your job? Or that of your spouse? Which other options do you have, especially in the current circumstance? Can you manage your expenditures? What it is that you are spending on is very, very important. Are you mixing essentials and non-essentials? We shall look at that later. So it is important for you to be very cost efficient. If possible, we recommend that you maximize incomes, minimize expenses, but then also have an agreeable understanding between wants and needs, essentials and non-essentials. There's going to be a call for RTB. RTB is what we refer to as return to basics. That shall guarantee you a walkthrough. It is important, again, to take stock. We talked about an assessment earlier. We need to understand what is your net worth. This is a subject that many of us interact with when we want to find out who the rich fellows in our in a neighborhood are. So we ask ourselves, what is so and so's net worth? Now the question comes to you, what is it that you are worth in terms of liquidity? What are the assets available to you? Which liabilities stand in your way? In this whole discussion, it's important you determine the assets, the real and personal property that you have, as well as determine their liabilities. Establish the bills, both outstanding and those that are foreseeable in the near and also in the long term. Third, we talked about priorities. What is it that we have to do when it comes to priorities? It's very key to discuss spending priorities. Spending priorities because normally money comes into play. How do you want to spend it is very key. As family, you need a dialogue to discuss where should your money go throughout this period of uncertainty. As a company, you need to decide which items are you going to spend money on. I would be surprised in the current space if there is a company spending money on an activity, for instance, like sports, which you won't be having in the anytime soon. So I do not know why you would have such a budget rollout. Take priorities on how you want to spend your money. That spending plan shall enable you determine your monthly incomes and how you can expend those incomes. It is very important that you adjust your expenses based on your set priorities. It's only an issue of knowing what exactly you want, how much you have, and how best you can have what you need and not what you want. But what are priorities? This must be a discussion that is probably running through everyone's mind. I initially introduced you to the idea of RTB, return to basics. Housing, food. Keep your debts at a minimum. manage your debts. Entertainment. It's surprising to know that entertainment is a priority. We all know of the old saying that all work without play makes Jack a dull boy. So find out what it is in the difficult circumstances that should be able to breathe life into you. Is it taking a stroll across the village? Is it playing football with your sons and daughters at home? Is it playing darts or draft at home? You must define entertainment with minimal expenses attached to it. It's very important for you to get creative, because without being creative, you cannot live in extraordinary time. You must find out how best to work within the means that you have. And then also, you need to establish which options are available to you as you set your priorities. While cutting expenses, we need to talk about taking advantage of locally available resources in your community. It's important to think about taking time together as family, as a team. We've seen the guidance that has been given to us, for instance, under these difficult circumstances. When you go visiting your mother, you cannot have any kind of physical distancing. Unfortunately, the coined word has been social distancing, but social distancing, as social scientists, we discourage this, because in many ways it means that societies cannot plan together, work together, but we believe that it is the physical distancing that should be heavily promoted, for instance, under these difficult circumstances. When you visit your mother, you are embracing physical distancing, but also ensuring that social distancing is not thrown away. You need to go out and do exercises in the local community. I earlier on alluded to that. You need to take advantage of free programs that are offered through the internet to grow yourself and your capacity, to ensure that you're not still. When the jobs finally open up, they'll not be looking out for dull individuals. They'll be looking up for sharp individuals, those individuals that enabled the company survive through the hard time. So were you one of them? How did you do that? Did you use any online resources to tool yourself? Did you exhibit a new skill? Or did you go on holiday and say, well, it's been long since I had a holiday, now let the company pay for me? Those conditions are not the normal. So you have to act out of the normal. If you are at home, to get involved in home duties is just the next to the new common. Don't look at it as an extra task. Find reason to belong to family, bake together, cook together, read stories to your little ones. This you can even do for your workmates. I would want to see many more CEOs make those phone calls to their staff and assuring them that all will be well, sharing perspectives, company visions, and letting them know that we are in this together. It's a journey that nobody can walk alone, so teamwork is very key. When you are setting up a spending plan, these are the things that you need to look out for. Track expenses of the previous months. Where were you spending money? You need to have everybody to participate. At the family level, everybody should be on board, even your children, because children know better than anybody else how best to survive in difficult circumstances. Explain to them why they won't be having ice cream every day. Explain to them. This does not mean that daddy does not want to buy you ice cream. but probably the conditions do not allow. And the little that we have at home should be spent on essentials. It's either ice cream or dinner. And so the options must be cut out. So let the children learn in their own language. This should be distilled down to them. You must also determine the income you have from all the sources within the family setup. Collectivity. Finding out what your wife earns or what your husband earns, and then within this difficult time, planning for those resources together can give you an advantage over those many families that are suffering. At the company level, it's important to establish which resources you have and establish how best these resources can be put to the best abilities. But as you spend, please have a diary, and then also distinguish between the variable spending areas. So cutting expenses is very important, like we have discussed. Children should be involved, and then also utilizing communities in all that we do is very key. Risk management, very, very important. Have you planned for your health? Do you run a health insurance scheme? Do you have an auto insurance scheme that you're planning for? Because these are things that will keep you going. You need good health to have a good future. Without good health, it's almost impossible for you to move forward. Managing stress. How are you managing the difficult time that you're going through? That is key. Try to find out ways to deal with stress, explore variable techniques that you can manage this particular unfolding. Then also find people to work with. These are some of the ideas we hinted on earlier in the discussion. But then also be positive and be sure that all will be well. As family, you must get to the peak of communication abilities. Communicate. It is more critical now than ever. Take some time to discuss all challenges that you go through and how best you can go over them. Also, have meetings at family level to ensure that all that it is that you're planning is well cut out and executed, and who is doing what and when. When disagreements occur, have time to discuss those disagreements. I talked about the meetings. They can be at family level or team level if it's a company, because at the end of the day, you need to come out strong. We have some examples of how these have helped communities in this country. In the recent past, we have seen market vendors stay late at their workplaces, which is a sign of resilience for the benefit of survival. We have seen the dedication and sacrifice by our medical personnel, which is very lean. We have seen saving practices that never have we seen in communities for them to survive and see another day. We have seen individuals braving long distances to go and work. But then also, more than ever before, we have a case for online off-station working. It's not going to be the usual for any company not to let their staff work from home, because now we know it's possible and the results are tangible. So the whole discussion we've had throughout this lesson today is that difficult circumstances in life are inevitable, and we should plan to mitigate their associated effects. It's not going to be a hitch-free life that you will lead. It will be life full of circumstances that are difficult. I want to thank you all for attending to this particular class. I hope you have learned one or two things, and you prepare for the next unfolding or circumstance that might be difficult in your life, as and when it happens, at a personal level, at a team level, as a company, and of course, as a country. I want to wish you well. Follow the guidelines. Keep yourself safe. We will get over this. Thank you.